Okay, great. Well, we want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. We welcome all of you. It's good to have you all here. We're finally getting around to the after action report for the wildfires. So it's nice to have a full house and you here to explain to us how everything went along and all the departments. So we appreciate that, and we'll just go right into it if that's okay. The first on the list that I have is Clackamas County Sheriff's Office. Is that true? So Dr. Strangfield, Sergeant Strangfield, you're there?
Yeah, Shane Strangfield, I'm the captain of the patrol division,
there you
Sheriff's
go.
Office. With us also is Tony Colias. He's lieutenant for the Sheriff's Office, and he's assigned as the chief of police for the city contract for the city of Estacada. So I'll start out, and Tony can chime in with anything else specifically for the city of Estacada. But as a Sheriff's Office in a whole, we're still in the middle of our debriefs. We had one scheduled earlier this month and then had to cancel and reschedule with other things that we had to address with protests and other stuff that we were assigned to deal with. So we actually have a full debrief and after action being built from that on December the 8th. So it's still in process, and that after action will be available for as an internal Sheriff's Office document after that time. So I'll give you an overview, obviously, for events for the Sheriff's Office and our involvement, and then we can build from there if that works.
Perfect.
So obviously, Labor Day and over Labor Day weekend, initially we had a high wind report, and we're working with the Emergency Operations Center and PGE with information for high winds, and actually a power shutdown for the first time in Oregon on the 26 corridor on Mount Hood, with concerns that the high winds would knock down power lines and create fires and problems, much that had been seen in California over the last couple of years. And so they were actively watching that and providing information to us about that high wind event over Labor Day weekend, and that they were watching it. They did ultimately make that decision to shut down the power on the Highway 26 corridor with their people in the field over Labor Day weekend, which was Sunday night. Nancy, is that correct? It was Sunday night that they shut it down initially?
Yeah, it was actually Monday.
It happened Monday or
Sunday? Yeah, I know our days all run together in September, but it was actually Monday evening they shut down.
Okay. So so obviously over Labor Day and on Monday, they shut down the power on the Highway 26 corridor from that high wind event, and all those notifications were made. Monday night into Tuesday, there was a fire event that occurred, obviously the Riverside Campground outside the National Forest Service, way east of Estacada. We had notification and help on Tuesday during the day, and personnel out in the field with fire to help with evacuations in the National Forest, to notify people in campgrounds and stuff to get out of the way. Due to the high wind event, it was a very dynamic situation for our people, and it just built constantly during the day. I'll defer to fire to talk about that more later. But essentially we sent people out Highway 224 to help with evacuations during the day on Tuesday. And by the time they were done doing that, they couldn't come back on Highway 224. They were blocked off. They actually had to drive around and come back around a different way because the fire had grown so large out in the National Forest Service area on Highway 224 that they couldn't come back that same way. So with that building over the day, we called in more personnel, and Nancy activated the EOC late Tuesday afternoon, I would say, and I'll let her speak about that. And we started coordinating and trying to marry up with fire to coordinate any additional evacuation efforts, and trying to build a unified command to try to work towards those efforts. That built through the week, obviously into Wednesday, as the events grew and there was more fires because of just the dynamic weather event that we were having. Just everything, we had fires popping up in different locations. We had a car fire, which created a large fire that had to be managed. There was another fire that happened because of another down power line. And there was multiple fires. And again, I'll let fire speak to that. But so we had to deal with different evacuation zones and create evacuations as the day built on. And we started creating larger and larger evacuation zones, which ultimately built into the danger of Estacada and evacuating the city of Estacada on, I believe, Wednesday, if I recall correctly. So Wednesday, the notification went out to the city of Estacada to evacuate. And then on Thursday, we did the same thing and built larger for the city of Malala and portions on the very outskirts of the southern borders, getting close to Oregon City as a buffer as well. Went to level 2 and level 2 notifications. So it was very rapidly developing. It was very dynamic. It was very historic for us in Clackamas County. There was a point where we were talking about evacuating an additional 100,000 people for our notifications and how we would manage that and work through that. So it was very stressful. And going into Thursday night into Friday, we thanked God essentially that the weather shifted and changed, because there was a very real possibility that the city of Estacada was going to be lost during the night, Thursday into Friday. When I came back Friday and the weather vetting had changed, I was able to take a breath, and we were able to pause and actually, get working. And that's when the more fire personnel arrived, including Oregon Fire Marshal took over some efforts. That was either Thursday or Friday. I'll let Nick talk about that again. And then the federal FEMA team came in during that time as well, but weren't set up and ready to go until that Saturday. So we were able to get those resources in, which helped contain the fire and work the fire in a way we couldn't the prior 72 hours. And we had prediction models that were provided to us with their mapping that helped us with our larger scale planning that we hadn't had access to or been able to even work with for the prior 72 hours. So that Saturday after Labor Day and on, we were to continually evaluate the evacuation zones, work with the firefighting efforts on a daily basis, and have meetings and evaluate those zones. And then ultimately we started rolling things back, and you saw us start rolling things back over that next week. So that's a larger scale evaluation of what was going on. For the sheriff's office, particularly for our staffing, we went to mandatory 12-hour shifts and split our department into 2 functions. For our patrol function, we had a patrol. We did 12 on, 12 off, 24-hour coverage to deal with the evacuation zones, evacuations, and security of the evacuation zones. And then we had 2 shifts, 12 on, 12 off, 12 on, 12 on, for just dealing with the patrol function that was not in the evacuation zones, to still take emergency calls for service outside of the fire zone. So it was all hands on deck. Like I said, 12 on, 12 off, but full 24-hour coverage, 24 hours a day to do that effort. That effort resulted ultimately in no known fatality, no fatalities, and no missing person out of the event. There was, I don't have the number right in front of me. It was like 26,000 people, and the residents, I don't have the number right off the top of my head, that were evacuated. That'll all be part of the larger report for our debrief in those fire evacuation zones, which will include the city of Estacada. So there you go. And Tony Colias, I'll turn it over to you for anything else I wanted to add to that overview.
Okay.
Well, I don't have a whole lot to add to it. I was evacuating myself, as most of you guys probably were, the first night, and then again during the week. I was in contact with Denise throughout that week and the next week about what level the city was going to go into, and before it happened, and when we started scaling things back, the same then, that be prepared that we're going to scale things back to a different level the next afternoon or whatever.
Okay. Tony, what time would you say you called that evac for an evac 3? Do you know what time that was?
I do not, and I didn't call it. I was working in the emergency operations center as a liaison. That call was made by the person in charge of our response, but I'm not sure exactly what time that came.
Yeah, we can look back at our calls, but it was definitely on Wednesday, and we'll look up the exact time.
All right, great. Any other questions regarding this? Anybody? Any of the counselors?
I have several, but I'll let someone else go first if they have any questions.
Okay. Anybody else?
Hey,
Okay.
just initial question. What do you guys feel that you did really well on, and maybe what are some areas that were you to do it again? Do you have anything that you'd want to see improved on?
I think what we did really well on is managing our personnel and resources. Just like you and as the Chief Coleus mentioned, our personnel were evacuating as well. And so there was a management of personnel that needed to evacuate and having personnel in. So splitting our division and putting ourselves on 12-hour shifts added a huge amount of resource for us for that first initial week. And that was a very huge benefit for us to help manage this. I have to throw a huge shout out to our local partners who threw a tremendous amount of additional law enforcement officers our way. And the list is endless. Going on Multnomah County, Gresham, Oregon City. I mean, just all of the local, Lake Oswego, the list goes on and on and on about people that helped send people to help take shifts and come help us with evacuations and security for your city and the surrounding region. So that went well. What we could do better, and I don't know, that'll be part of our larger debrief, I think, is that initial 72 hours was very chaotic and we weren't prepared for how fast evolving that was. And since we had the need for so much personnel in the field, the communication about where the fire lines were and evaluating that was really difficult. Fire was in the field fighting the fire as best they could. And so getting information back and forth between us in that first 72 hours was difficult. And because we were both out in the field, all hands on deck, just trying to get people out of the way of the fire and save lives, right? That's what we were both trying to do. So it worked out, and we were out in the field as best we could. But I think there is some improvement that we could fall back on for that initial 72 hours of communication, to us getting the information that we were seeing in the field to them and what they're seeing in the field to us a little bit better.
That's good. Did you get all your questions answered, Paul? All right, great.
Just to interrupt real briefly, you can do it however you want to, but my intention kind of was to go through all the reports first and then let the council discuss and ask questions, because I think that sometimes other agencies might weigh in on something that might clarify something a little bit better before we delve into a bunch of questions. And so if you want to go ahead and ask questions now, that's totally fine with me. But that was kind of my intent with the agenda. So
no, we can move it along. That's fine. Let's go to Clackamas Fire then, and let's see what would that be, Brandon? Or would that be Ken?
We're going to start. Good evening, everyone. We'll start with Division Chief of Operations, Nick Browne, who's on the call.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Brandon. Hey, Shane, thanks a lot for what you shared. As always, it's amazing working with you guys, and what you guys did during that fire was phenomenal, and couldn't have been the success was a lot of what you guys did in evacuating the area. So we appreciate CCSO. Thanks everybody for having us here. I just want to give a quick update. We are like Shane discussed with CCSO. We're in the middle of gathering data. We've hired an outside consultant to do our AAR, and so we are in the fact-finding stage of the AAR and gathering all the data and shipping it to him. Is basically, so we're basically right in the middle of our AAR process ourselves. To give you a little bit of a background, like Shane stated, Friday is when we started to understand about the potential weather event that was scheduled for Labor Day. And as we started monitoring the weather throughout the weekend and monitoring the weather on Monday, it became apparent that the projected weather was going to happen. And so really quickly, once that wind started picking up, the 911 system started to get overwhelmed, is the best way to describe it. So at about 6 p.m. on 9/7 until about 9/10 at noon, Clackamas Fire ran 223 calls for service. And of those 223 calls for service, 144 of them were working fires. Of those 144 working fires, 22 of them were greater alarm fires. And what a greater alarm fire is, a second alarm fire or greater. And in Clackamas Fire's response matrix, anything that's a third alarm or greater pretty much wipes out Clackamas Fire as far as response. We depend heavily on mutual aid partners. At 6 p.m. 9/7, we had a 2-alarm grass fire that started in Estacada. And within 2 minutes of that, we had another 2-alarm fire that happened in the Redland area. And from that point on, we knew that we were going to be busy. So from 6 p.m. till about 1 a.m. that first night, we had 35 fires. And of those 35 fires, 11 of those fires were greater alarm incidents. And of those 11 greater alarm incidents, 6 of them were 3+ alarms. And of those 3+ alarms, 2 of them were 5+ alarm fires that lasted the duration of the event. One of which was in Estacada. We immediately started to, depending on the fire, we started to utilize reverse 911 and CCSO to start evacuating neighborhoods. The fire was wind driven, and it wasn't just wind driven in one direction. We had wind behavior that was going in all directions. So as the fire would be running one direction, we'd start to get ahead of it, and then it would just turn and run the other way. And so it seemed like we were having that kind of fire behavior throughout that first night. As the incidents progressed onto the next day, about 11 o'clock, Clackamas Fire, we got with the Board of County Commissioners and declared an emergency declaration. And at 4 p.m. that day, on September 8th, is when we contacted the state for a conflagration for the fires. Because we knew what we were dealing with at this point were not isolated events. We knew that what we were dealing with was a natural disaster. With the relative humidity, which was anywhere from 5 to 9%, it made for some pretty explosive fire behavior. Along with the wind, it just created a pretty chaotic situation as far as the amount of fires and the amount of resources that we had going everywhere. At 6:30 it was September 10th, is when the Oregon State Fire Marshal's office came in, and the transition of command was turned over to Oregon State Fire Marshal's office for a conflag. And an EOC was established with them. Now, typically when we have a situation like that where a conflag, the state comes in and the state brings an incident command team, an IMT team, and they bring resources. What we had for this on the initial turnover was an incident commander and an operations chief. So Clackamas Fire continued to fill roles throughout that command staff because the state was overwhelmed based on fires as well. And they are in the middle of doing their after action review, which will come out, I believe, 12/10. So we had a lot of fires that we were trying to mitigate, and we realized that this was not just isolated to fires that were in Estacada or in the Springwater area or in Oregon City. We had a countywide issue here. And so Clackamas Fire, understanding that local resources were stripped because our mutual aid partners couldn't even come to help us, we took a county approach to this, understanding that Colton and Molalla and all of our areas were so strapped with resources, we took a county approach. And so we started to try to divide resources and allocate accordingly. Some of the bigger fires that we sent resources to were what we called the Unger Road fire. That was in Colton, and we dedicated a lot of resources to that based on the Hillock Burn area and the potential for the fire to go to Estacada as well as to the Beaver Creek area. We allocated 5+ alarms worth of crews to Dowdy Road. And that's one of the instances that lasted the whole entire duration of these fires. There was a lot of information and misinformation about the pulling of crews middle of the day, Thursday. It was about 11 o'clock, Shane, maybe 11:30, if you correct me if I'm wrong, that we met with CCSO and the IC from from the Oregon State Fire Marshal's office. And it was right during that meeting that the IC got a phone call from the state, and he stepped out of our meeting with Shane and the fire liaison, or the CCSO liaison with fire. And it was at that point that the fire behavior analysis from the state was letting us know of some extreme fire behavior potential with a plume-driven fire. And so at that point, we got back to the ICP, and the decision was made to pull crews off the fire line. Now, knowing that Estacada had been evacuated the day prior because of our interaction with CCSO and the direct link that Shane provided, which we were grateful for as far as progression, as far as evacuations. We pulled crews to the city of Estacada and to the Unger Road area on 211 in between Colton Fire Station and Springwater. And then we pulled crews off the Dowdy Road fire to the training center. Our approach with this was strategic. In case the extreme fire behavior that was projected to happen, we wanted to have resources allocated appropriately so that we could draw our lines in the sand and protect accordingly. And like Shane described, thank God that didn't happen. Thank God the fire went a different direction, and we had inversion, and the wind died, and we had fire behavior and weather that actually went into our benefit at this point. So as far as a after action view, we are right in the middle of it. I just wanted to give you a brief history of what we responded to and the events that we responded to. And I also have a layout of specific events, if you'd like, regarding to how many fires we had in Estacada during that time frame, and the resources that were allocated accordingly, if you would like that.
Thank
Happy to
you.
answer questions.
We'll do the questions at the end, but we appreciate your report. So we'll get back to that in just a minute here.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Clackamas County Disaster Management.
Yes, good afternoon or
Nancy,
evening.
how are you, Nancy?
I'm good. It's been a very, very long year.
Oh, hasn't it though?
So yeah, good evening, everyone. So thank you for having us here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the initial response and what we had going on. Jeannine is here, and she's going to talk a little bit about going into the recovery piece, which of course does continue. So you have heard from both fire and law what was going on with them. As part of all of that, the Emergency Operations Center, and I actually looked it up. My first page was at 12:17 on the 8th, which was very, very early that Tuesday morning, which means that probably all the fires started, of course, before that and on the 7th late that evening. As was discussed earlier, we were part of what was going on with PGE and shutting down the corridor, or shutting down all of the power on the corridor at the Hoodland area. We worked on that all weekend with PGE. So we started that on Friday. Me and one other staff, we had calls with them at least once a day to see what was going to happen. And again, we were watching the weather very closely. And we were sending out messages to that area on a, excuse me, my cat's in my way here, sorry, through that weekend to say we could be shutting this down. So we actually had at least 3 of our Everbridge, which is our reverse 911 system, messages that went out before the fires actually started late on Monday night. So we did end up sending out the last message on Monday afternoon that said, yes, your power is going to be shut down. And they started shutting it down around 6 o'clock on Monday. So that was all going on the Mount Hood corridor. And then at 12:15 that night, or 12:17, I got my first page, and we actually did open the EOC at that time. So I had 3 EOC members that came in. We were working with fire and law both at that time at CCOM and trying to make sure that we go through the steps. So one of our responsibilities is to make sure that we go through the state and let them know what's going on. And we get what we call ORS numbers, which is an Oregon Emergency Response Number. I've never done this in my career. I got 4 ORS numbers that night. So for every fire we had that night, I had to get an ORS number. I got 4 that night, which is pretty amazing. And so we actually helped CCOM at that time. They started doing all of the evacuations and the reverse 911 calling. I'm just going to call it Everbridge. So they started sending around all the Everbridge messages that night with the information that they had. So those first initial steps for those level 3s in particular, which of course were very, very critical to get out. We looked at the maps and said, you know, worked with fire and law and said, we're going to go from here to here and sent those out so we could get people out of the way. As we worked through the next few days, of course, the EOC was up and running full-fledged. And the EOC was opened that first night, anywhere from 12 to 1. We would close down and then we opened between 6 and 7. So we had a lot of staff that were coming in for some very long hours to make sure that we were getting everything done. The levels for 1, 2, and 3, of course, we did send those out, and we were part of helping with the mapping. We worked with fire and law to make sure we understood the areas that they wanted to have the notifications to go to, making sure we had everything right. We did things that are called like shape files to make sure we could get it as close as we could, as fast as we could. And at that time too, we were still making sure that those level 3s were going out really fast, because again, we had to get people out of the way very, very, very quickly. Through the nights, it seems like all of those came later in the evening, and then we were having to set up shelters. And the first night that we were getting people out of the way, we had a lot of RVs, and it seems like a lot of them really came to Oregon City, and they were in big parking lots because we had no one place for them to go to at that time. And the communication, you know, after they left their home, a lot of times that communication was really difficult to do. But we did have a place for people to go if they needed, you know, something like they needed to sleep in their cars. And there was a little bit of congregate sheltering there too, which was Clackamas Community College, which did a great job of helping us out. As it turned out the next evening, that area went to level 2, which included Oregon City. So then we had to move. We can't have a shelter in a level 2, so we had to move. We ended up moving our shelter even outside of Clackamas County because we didn't want to have to move it again. The RV shelter we did set up at Clackamas Town Center, and we were very comfortable doing that because of course they were on wheels, and we would be able to move them again if we needed to more quickly than we were people who needed congregate sheltering or were just out in their cars and that kind of stuff. So we realized that we did move people around. As we worked through that in those few weeks, we did have people that were out working with and talking to everyone that was in those sheltering, at least as many people as we could, to let them know what was going on with their home, letting them know, you know, how would you be notified when you were going back in, etc. So we were taking care of all of that, and all of the details around making sure that this may not sound hard, but it is, but trying to make sure that as we were doing those things and we were paying for those things, we were making sure that all of the paperwork was done so we could get reimbursement back from FEMA, which I think Estacada has been through some of this before. You understand, I'm looking at Melanie, how difficult that can be. So we were working on those issues too. FEMA started coming in as well, and also the state. So we were working with that as they came in and started providing us with information. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jeannine and talk a little bit about how we worked into some of the efforts that we have ongoing now with recovery.
Thank you, Nancy. So yeah, I was brought into the EOC about the time this was all happening. The week I started was the week of the 14th. And the first thing that they assigned me to was to start working on the recovery. So a few of us started contacting both Estacada and Molalla to find out what services were being offered. As Nancy said, we were unable to set up kind of relief or recovery centers in a level 2. Estacada was still in level 2 at that point. So we were starting to put together plans on how we would be able to establish a reentry or recovery center in both Estacada and Molalla. We explored the First Baptist Church as a possible location because they're already certified as a Red Cross facility. After a couple of days of exploring that, we learned that the Estacada Community Watch had already mobilized on the 14th, and they had already started accepting donations and set up their reentry relief center working out of the Cazadero. Once we realized that, they already had an establishment. They were underway in providing some of those services. So it didn't make sense for us to proceed to try to duplicate efforts that were already started there. So rather than duplicate efforts, and we couldn't even set up yet because it was still level 2, the county EOC decided at that point to cooperate and work with the community organization and support them as best we could because they were already mobilized. So we started working with them to figure out what logistical support they needed to adequately run those services. So in talking with them, we were able to provide from the county portable parking lot lights so that they could run that center 24/7, electronic digital road sign to help promote and advertise where that center was to help drive people there. We supported them with traffic barricades, a couple porta potties, some hand washing stations, traffic vests, pop-up tents, a hot box food warmer since they were serving people 24/7, serving utensils, whiteboards for signs, KN95 masks to make sure that everyone still was practicing the COVID policies that we needed to keep everyone safe, toilet paper, water. We helped conduct other donations. Starbucks contacted the EOC and wanted to do a major comfort donation. So we were able to direct that to Estacada, to the relief center, because that was already underway, as well as pallets of dog food and cat food to help all those families. So as soon as we could mobilize, we provided all of those logistical support services to the Estacada Community Watch to help them support those efforts. At the same time, we were working with the Molalla Foothills Community Church to help provide some support relief to them as well, not to the level that we did in Estacada, just because Estacada really rallied and pulled together an amazing relief center out there. We started working then with FEMA. FEMA came on the ground the week of the 20th of September to help us establish an official fire resource center. So in working with the Estacada Community Watch, they were indicating that they were looking to demobilize that Sunday, September 27th. They found that their need was winding down. About the same time, we were working with FEMA to establish a fire resource center. So that first weekend, we had FEMA set up at City Hall to provide the initial FEMA registration. That's September 25th, 26th, 27th in Estacada. At the same time, the county decided to set up the official fire resource center in Molalla. As we looked at the geography of the residents and the homes that were impacted through the fire, both from the Riverside fire as well as from the Beachy Creek fire, we found that the Beachy Creek fire really impacted people south of Molalla, anywhere from 10 to 18 miles south of Molalla, up South Sawtell Road and up Butte Creek Road. So initially there was questions as to why we didn't set up the first fire resource center in Estacada. We really wanted to try to geographically centralize where that fire resource center was to support impacted wildfire families and residents coming from both directions. And knowing that the people from South Molalla already had to travel anywhere from 10 to 18 miles to get to Molalla, to expect them to go all the way to Estacada seemed like a little bit more of an extreme. So we identified the first fire resource center in Molalla, which seemed more centrally geographically located. So we opened up the fire resource center in Molalla on September 28th. FEMA operated out of the fire resource center that first weekend, the 25th, 26th, 27th as well, just as FEMA. on the 28th, we opened up the Fire Resource Center in partnership with FEMA. And then we set it up similar to run as a multi-agency resource center where we had Clackamas County, taxation and assessors there, the development services for building codes, planning and permitting to help people file their right of entry forms, any other debris issues that they had. We were able to bring in DHS services for aging and disabilities, for SNAP relief, behavioral health go teams, trauma intervention program, other social services providing bilingual interpretation, soil and water conservation district set up information. The Oregon Division of Financial Regulation was there providing wildfire insurance information. Legal Aid of Oregon came one day to provide pro bono service for people needing legal aid. Clackamas Workforce Partnership. We are also able to work with distributing Salvation Army food boxes and Red Cross cleanup kits through the Fire Resource Center. And our largest partner, in addition to FEMA, was the Northwest Baptist Disaster Relief Services, who helped us every single day to help check in and provide spiritual and mental service for everyone who came to the Fire Resource Center. We kept the Fire Resource Center open through October 22nd. I apologize. I have to look at my notes. FEMA changed the dates on us. So they were going to close it 2 times, but they kept extending it just because we found out that we were still providing valuable resources to all of our citizens. So we did keep it open actually through October 22nd. And at that point, then FEMA established their external outreach site where people could then come back and who had registered with FEMA initially, but were needing help with their claims if they were denied or said they needed additional assistance. At that point, when FEMA set up their external resource center, we looked to bring that one back to Estacada because, again, as we were evaluating the numbers of homes and residents that were impacted, the larger volume of impact was around the Estacada Colton area. So felt it was would be better service to those individuals to set up the FEMA external outreach site in Estacada back at City Hall. So we partnered with them. Thank you very much for Melanie for accommodating FEMA there. And they operated those services from October 20th through, they originally scheduled through November 16th, but we found that the numbers of people they were serving was diminishing. There was not as much need as they initially hoped. So they actually closed that FEMA site last Friday, November 13th, 3 days earlier than expected.
So I just want to add to that too. We've been working through COVID, of course, with everything that's been happening through wildland fire, which collided quite interestingly. And one of the reasons too, we were trying to find some places in Estacada too, but there wasn't anything big enough that FEMA said they would accommodate them space-wise too. So that was part of our challenges too, trying to get something in Estacada early on.
Yeah. Well, we thank you. That was a very good report, and you guys were amazing. The lights and the bathrooms and everything that you put on the ground helped us immensely. We appreciate that. The masks, everything that you brought to the table really, really helped our people, and we appreciate every bit of that. So thank you. Moving along, we are at the Estacada School District. Mike Waer.
Good evening. I don't have as much to report, but other just kind of our experience during this time. Again, I'm representing the Estacada School District. On Tuesday, I received a pretty early call from Nancy Bush saying that they're going to be evacuating some individuals from the Three Links area and that we needed to temporarily hold them. So we immediately took some action and made sure we had parking space available for those individuals to evacuate to. And throughout the course of the day, as all you guys have explained, it kind of rapidly progressed. We were watching the smoke plumes come closer to our city and started to take a little bit more action, preparing for potential temporary evacuees or command centers. And I think about 2 o'clock or so, we did get a contact from a sheriff's office asking to open up our buildings for a temporary command center, which we did. as well as a temporary evac center for those who needed to evac. And I think we did not get a count, but over the course of a day and a half or so, I think we had 50 or so trailers in our parking lots and our back grounds, and so that we could support those individuals through this experience. Our main goal was to make sure that we were a resource for the first responders, the city, and those who needed shelter. We did provide some shelter to a few individuals overnight, but for the most part, they all came in with their own vehicles or trailers to support. On Wednesday, we had extra resources available because of what we're having to deal with pandemic. We're in a comprehensive distance learning, and we distribute food out to our students via the bus. And we had just started the school year, so it wasn't the best start of our school year, but we had a bunch of bagged food for lunches for students for a couple days. So we started dispersing that out to first responders, as well as the evacuees who were on site, and as well as bringing in other resources, water, other food for individuals, as much as we could. And then when the level 3 was enacted, we asked people to start vacating our area, as well as our employees. We were trying to do as much as we could. The one last thing that we were able to do was to transport individuals from an assisted living location to the Clackamas Community College. We transported about 20 individuals, 25 or so individuals. And about the time we left Clackamas Community College, that level 3, I believe was implemented. So we had to send our bus drivers home, our administrative staff, our incident command staff that we have on site. We had to send them out. A few of us stayed around just for a little bit longer to make sure that we could get people out safely and help as much as we could, and then evacuated as well. And the entire time, I just have to say, I was kind of attached to Melanie Wagner's hip. So I wanted to just basically thank her for making sure that we were supported and that we can make sure that we were in communication. I was able to get into the EOC and be able to be up to date on information so we could update our families and our leadership team through the process. But again, till it was all over, we just wanted to make sure that we were a resource through the whole process. And I feel like we learned a lot as ourselves. We know that our buildings are some main hubs of the city, and we want to make sure that they're open to the community, open to first responders in the need. We think we did that pretty well, but there's always opportunities to improve. But again, not a lot to report other than just what we wanted to do during that experience. So.
Well, we appreciate you. We thank you very much for everything that you did, and you were spot on. So thank you. Moving on, we have the report from the city staff.
Well, I'm going to start and then hand it over to Melanie. Melanie is our emergency coordinator, just as Mike is for the school. So they were involved at the EOC once that got, I think starting on Wednesday was the first time that Melanie and Mike were in the EOC, even though it was opened on Tuesday. But, so I don't really have any much timeline more to report. Everyone did a pretty good job. The level 2 for Estacada was September 8th. Level 3 was September 9th through the 16th. On the 16th, it was put back down to a level 2 and people were able to start returning. On September 11th, the mayor signed a declaration, emergency resolution, which gave certain powers for things to happen in an emergency. And then September 23rd was when we were back down to no level. I'm not going to say back to normal, but it was as normal as this year has been, I guess, at that time. The city did not activate an EOC. Melanie again went to the county EOC. September 9th, I had a lot of communications with PGE about what was going on in their neck of the woods. They had shut down the west side hydro facilities, and they had had all campgrounds evacuated safely. And then all the dams were initiated. They were turned off and just were initiated spill levels. That's how all the dams, and they felt like that was the safest way. It didn't cause any harm to the Estacada area to do that. And they had the fish facilities placed in a bypass mode. So the dams were operating in spill mode and no immediate concerns for public safety at that time as far as the dams were concerned. And they also evacuated staff and the public out of all of their areas. And then Clackamas Fire, Steve Dieters was, of course, talking to us. And we also had information from the EOC regarding what Clackamas Fire was doing. And that Clackamas Fire was helping the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office and the Oregon State Patrol with the evacuations and going door to door in our community to be sure everyone was out on the level 3. In the September 9th briefing, it was discussed that the most helpful thing for the city to do was get out the information from the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office, which was basically to lead people to the Clackamas County Wildfire website for updated information. And that's where all the information was. And we put that on our website and our Facebook page. As far as staff, of course, most of the staff was evacuating on Wednesday. Wednesday, there were people, most of the city hall staff was evacuating, so they didn't pick up again till Thursday, but all staff worked continuously through the evacuation 3 level remotely. And we got, I think, 3 calls of people. One call was just from a lady that was mad and she didn't ask for anything. And then another call was from a man that wanted to know if he could come back to his house. And we responded to all these calls right away and called them back and told them, no, we're still in a level 3. You need to wait till, we get out of it. And they appreciated that. So we didn't get many calls for service or anything, anyone wanting anything from us. I think people were mostly staying tuned to the internet and getting their information from there because we didn't receive a lot of calls. Public Works, some of the Public Works guys, they stayed around, a couple of them because they were fighting the fires at their homes. And the plant continued to work. They did have to leave for a period of time. I think I gave you guys this report that they had to leave on Wednesday for a period of time, but they went back on Thursday and at that time did 24/7 on the plants to keep them running, to be sure that there weren't any bumps, and to also coordinate water usage because we were low on waters. And we did have to call in during the evacuation 3, a couple of Public Works to turn off, people had left their sprinklers on. And so it was draining our water supply. And they came in, they didn't go into anyone's yards. They only turned off waters that they could see from the road. And it was about 50 services that they turned off. There were many more that people had it on the roof or had it in their backyards, but we didn't go onto anyone's property. So those were left on, but it did allow the plant to finally catch up once those 50 services were turned off with the water running 24/7. Public Works, everyone came back to work. Like I said, we went back to 2 on the 16th. And so by Monday, even though it was still level 2, I think Monday, everyone was back to work as normal and getting things done. And that's about it from the city side, except for Melanie was more involved with meetings. Melanie and I attended, I think starting on Thursday morning was, I think it was 10 o'clock meetings with emergency, and it was the emergency coordinators at the meeting, but although Melanie sent me the invitation. And then I think by the 11th, the mayors were added to that meeting. The mayors were let in on the 11th or 12th to attend those meetings. So that's all I have. Melanie can give us more updates from the EOC.
Okay, thank you. And this was a perfect example of over the years as we've been doing exercises on an annual basis, how we understand that we're a small organization, a small city, and that if something happened, we'd be really reliant on our partners. And in this case, it was completely pretty much over our heads and out of our hands. And we were completely reliant on partners. And so we just appreciate all the work that was done and all the just all the coordination that went on between the fire district and the school district and Clackamas County Disaster Management and the sheriff's office. Just they're our partners when we exercise, and obviously we were really dependent on them in the real thing too. So I just appreciate everybody, all that they did. It was an unprecedented event, and I thought that, well, obviously we're here to see what could we do better, what would we change if it happens again or something similar happens. But I do really appreciate everybody. A lot of what I did was keeping Facebook updated on the website. I think we were 2 or 3 days in before I started updating the website, but I kept a running page going and just kind of added to the top of the page whatever updates were coming out each day so that people could scroll down through that and see the history and know that they've got the most recent news. We shared a lot of Facebook posts. We made some Facebook posts of our own, which was a learning point on how much information needs to get shared and in what way. And so that was just trying to find ways to keep people informed and realizing, I don't think necessarily the general public realized that it was really hard to get information at the beginning because, like we've heard, it was progressing so fast that I thought by going to the EOC, I'd hear the morning and evening updates and I would know what's going on. Well, I got there on Wednesday evening and realized that it wasn't. I thought it was, of course, Estacada is the center of my world, so I thought this is all about Estacada, and I got there and I realized it's a lot bigger deal than what's going on in Estacada, and there was a lot of good work going on in Estacada at that point, but it was way bigger than I realized, and as far as the entire area. So pretty much we tried to get information out, share information, share the news releases or the when they were doing the press conferences, make sure those got onto our Facebook page in case people were checking the city Facebook page rather than just going to the county page or something, or the fire page. So we did that, and then trying to connect resources as we were approaching the de-escalation. We knew the Estacada Community Watch was starting to get set up. I knew Jeannine was working on getting a Red Cross Center set up and a FEMA Center. So I was kind of directing them to the Baptist Church, but then they couldn't set up there until we were back down to one. And then the ant farm, Noonpa from the ant farm came in, and he was feeling the need that we needed a resource, a relief center for people. And so he was making plans because he didn't know all of this that was going on. And so I think Matt connected him to me, and he was making plans to set up a relief center. And so I was able to say, hey, we're working on this with Red Cross. The Estacada Community Watch has got the one going down at the in the Cazadero parking lot. So he went down and connected there and realized, and Jeannine also, both Noonpa and Jeannine saw what was going on and realized we didn't want to split up the efforts for relief. And so everything just started going to the relief center. I thought that on multiple occasions, I thought that truckloads of supplies were coming to City Hall and we were going to have to store them at the shop and try to get them out to people. And I'm waiting for these deliveries to be made. I think that you counselors might have gotten an email from Denise about asking if you'd be willing to come to City Hall and help distribute these. But once again, the Community Watch Relief Center was just going strong, and everything ended up going there. We didn't have to store anything. They were able to get all of those comfort kits and cleaning kits dispersed. And I think Reesers called me with donations. There was a lot of people and organizations really wanted to help our community. And so it was great to see that. And I think that's about all that I will share. You've heard a lot of information. That's I think, Denise, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that or no? Okay.
Okay, well, I thank you too for your report. That was very in-depth, so thank you. Now it is time for council discussion and questions. So I'm going to allow the council to have an opportunity to weigh in on any of these that we've heard tonight. Do any of you wish to ask a question? Please raise your hand so I can see you. Anybody? You're all pretty comfortable?
I'll start.
Okay, Katie, go for it.
Really quick, as it relates to the emergency management section in our own municipal code, I've asked this question once before, but I feel like I'm going to get a different answer tonight. Our municipal code says that we have an emergency manager. Who is that normally, and who was that during this response? I guess this is to Denise and to Melanie. Which one of you guys would be considered the emergency manager?
You're still on mute, Denise.
I know, I couldn't find the right mouse to get my unmute because I have two computers going. So, so yeah, once we had the resolution for the emergency resolution, I'm getting down to it here. So, the mayor is the chief executive officer of the city of Estacada in an emergency. If he's any reason unable or unavailable to perform the duties, then it goes to the president of the council member who's recently served.
No. I'm talking about the emergency manager, not the succession of it, but the emergency manager. When it says that this section, and if my laptop didn't just die, I'd be able to read it to you. But the part where it says that we have an emergency management department that is overseen by the emergency manager, and then these are the different players, and that would be 2.36 in our municipal code. I can probably.
So in the code, it says the emergency management shall be directly responsible to the mayor.
What's the next sentence say?
And shall be supervised by the emergency manager. So I think in our, then you go to our emergency plan, because it doesn't say anything in the code about it. And the emergency manager, it depends on the type, but it's either myself or the fire chief, I think is what it says. Melanie, is that correct?
Yeah, yep, that's right. And we used to partner, most of our emergencies that we practiced for, we did depend a lot on the fire district. We had the little trailer over there, and we relied heavily on them or law enforcement. But I think
I guess what I'm trying to get at though is that we didn't really have a clear emergency manager in this situation, but having an emergency manager is pretty clearly spelled out in our municipal code.
So that's correct. So we didn't open our EOC because we were under the county emergency management. So I think for this one, Nancy probably was our emergency manager because she was the one in charge of the whole event. Nancy, do you?
But then the way that our municipal code was written, she would have been then directly responsible or directly under the mayor at that point, which that probably wouldn't have been the case had the relationship been where she was the emergency manager. So would it have been more appropriate at the beginning of this back on the 7th or the 8th when this was starting for our city to have designated an emergency manager at that point?
Yeah, we, like I said, we didn't do our emergency resolution until the 11th. So, and at that time, normally you would open your EOC, but we didn't have an EOC for this event. I think if we would have opened one, which we could have definitely outside of the city, we could have like put one together in Milwaukee or Happy Valley. At that point, it probably would have been either the Chief Charlton from the fire department that was in charge of that with the mayor and I being there. And then Melanie as the emergency coordinator.
Okay. I guess since we've still got Nancy on the phone, I've got a couple of questions for Nancy specifically. Is she available?
Yeah, she's here.
Right here.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi.
Hi there. Thank you for everything. You know, pre-disaster and during the disaster and after the disaster. We appreciate you. Out of curiosity, why was the power shutdown ordered for the 26 corridor, but nowhere else? I'm just kind of curious because it seems like why shut down 26 instead of 26 and 224?
So first of all, that's the first time that this has been done in the state of Oregon, period, ever. And the part of the reason, well, a big part of the reason is because PGE, along with Clackamas County, and they're doing this in other counties, did as risk assessment, said, where's our greatest risk? So we started actually putting all of that together at least a year ago, if not longer. Because it's not like just a switch. You can switch it off really easy, but there's things you have to have in place in order to power up. So because PGE saw that as the greatest risk, given what could happen, and if you have that area obviously catch on fire too, so that is where they started. They continued to look at that and see, you know, it was like, well, where else can we do this? But it's not just a simple switch on and off. And we had everything in place to do that. We actually signed the agreement with PGE on July 30th. So everything was not actually done and finalized for that corridor shutdown possibility until July 30th. So that's why it was, because that is where the greatest risk was in the county.
I appreciate that. Nancy, in your experience, and maybe this is right now your opinion, but if you've got facts or anything to back it up, I'd love that. How long do you think it takes for a reverse 911 to successfully contact someone after a decision has been made to evacuate their home?
So we actually have that data.
I love it.
We have completed calls, how many calls didn't get answered, how many calls went to an answering machine. We have all of that data, which I don't have in front of me. But we actually, our system now does its own, we call it throttling. We had a system before that we had to try to throttle that manually, which I don't know if you remember a few years ago when Portland had a problem and it didn't go out because it didn't throttle correctly. So now it's within minutes, because depending on where it's going, it throttles for that area. So for a more rural area, it has to throttle more, but it's within minutes whenever it actually goes from when we hit the button to when it gets to the phone.
Okay, and so that's minutes between when you hit the button and when it reaches their phone. I guess I'm kind of more curious when they're in the EOC command center and the decision is made at that point in time to evacuate a certain part of town. How long does it take between that moment in time and the person successfully receiving the reverse 911? How long of a time frame are we looking at for that scenario?
Again, it is not that long, because, and especially when we were doing those level 3s, and before they woke me up, CCOM was doing all of that and did that through that first night. So whenever they worked with law enforcement as well as fire, and I was actually sitting in CCOM that night, and the decision would come in from the field to say, we got to have this done. We literally would look at the mapping that we have to do. And from what they were telling us, it's like, let's do it from here to here to here to here. And it was very crudely done because we'd rather over evacuate than under. And then it went out very quickly at that point. So I would say, I mean, no more than 15 minutes for sure. I think it's,
and that's from the time the mapping is done, right, Nancy?
I'm sorry.
That's from the time the mapping is done to the call.
That is actually from the time when, like, if law enforcement called us and said, we need this neighborhood evacuated, it would be from that moment we got it in CCOM that night. It would be within the next 10 to 15 minutes.
And before I ask that same question to CCSO, because I think I saw
Shane
also raise his hand to answer that question, but I wanted to get to the maps itself. So How long of a period of time do you think between that decision to evacuate being made and the maps themselves being updated and uploaded onto the county website? How long of a period of time do you think that happens?
So the first night it didn't happen because it was so fast. It just didn't happen that first night. And I may have to look at Shane to see if I can't remember.
I'm sorry, is the first night the 7th or the 8th?
The first night is the 7th when we started doing all of those evacuations.
Okay.
So I got the page at 12:17, which was actually the morning of the 8th. We didn't have it that night. We couldn't have it that night. I would tell you in the best scenario, what happened that night, it was not going to get done that night.
Yeah.
Because that was an intense night, obviously.
Yeah.
So it did not happen that night, but I can't remember, and I am going to look at Shane and Brandon. I don't know if it was the next day or 2 days later where we're able, I think the next day we started putting things up on a map for people to look at. And for the mapping, we tried to make sure the map was updated actually before we sent out notices. We did not do that on level 3 for sure, because level 3 we had to get out. It was so critical. But at that point, we were working with CCSO as well as Clackamas Fire to say, is this good? Is it good? The map looks good. The map is up and we're putting out the information. So it happened all at the same time after that first night.
Awesome. And then I guess my last question just for you, Nancy, is how do you feel about a city sharing the evacuation notices? I guess both before the county maps and after the county maps have been updated. I want kind of your own opinion on both of those scenarios. If, like, for the example, the city was aware that we were going to a level 3 evacuation before the county map had an opportunity to update, how would you feel about a city sharing that information prior to the county map being updated?
So when I was sharing that information with your city manager and with Melanie at that time, I was telling you what we were expecting to happen, but I didn't know for sure it was going to happen until I got it from CCSO and fire. So if you shared it at that time, you could be sharing something. And I will tell you, there were a couple of things that didn't happen, you know, what we thought was going to happen and when it was going to happen, just for whatever reason. So if you shared it at that time, then it didn't happen, then both you and I lose credibility.
Sounds good. Shane Strangfield, you looked like you had something that you wanted to say in response to the question of how long it takes for someone to receive notification of a level 3 evacuation after the decision's been made.
No, what I wanted to share actually was just very quick with the evacuations, just so you're aware. There were 3 things going on for those notifications through Everbridge, which was both a reverse 911 on landlines, a cell phone notification, which is crucial to the mapping. We had to map out areas and boundaries for those cell phone notification boundaries. And then on top of that, to make sure that people were notified in those, especially in those level 3 zones, we did door-to-door knocking in those level 3 zones. So just to make sure, because we did get information back that even with the reverse 911, people weren't getting the message, they didn't get the cell phone notification. So we physically went out door to door to make those notifications. I just want to make sure you were aware of that as a council, and when you're talking about those level 3 zones, that you had that information.
Thank you. And then Mr. Strangfield, I was hoping that you could talk about the CCSO level of involvement with the Dowdy Road fire on specifically the 7th. I know you were talking a lot about sort of the CCSO involvement in the early stages of the Riverside fire, but I didn't hear a lot of talk about the Dowdy fire. So I was kind of curious about the CCSO involvement in the Dowdy fire on 9/7.
Yeah, we were involved in all of them. So, I mean, to the same level that I talked about before, we were involved with the evacuation zones, the door-to-door notifications, the planning process, communication with fire, security as it followed up. So, you know, it was the same across the board for all the fires that were coming in. Personnel will be sending everywhere. We're evaluating the evacuation zones for the Unger fire, the Dowdy Road fire, including the Riverside fire and other ones that were popping up. But the largest ones that we ended up dealing with were those 3, Riverside, Dowdy, and the Unger fires, and including communicating with fire, infrastructure, ODOT, DTD about reopening those zones. So just as Nancy said about PGE and shutting off power and then turning it on is actually a longer process. The same thing was happening for coming back and rolling back the zones for the evacuation zones. We may have said, hey, okay, there's no fire danger there, but can we get people back in that zone yet? And that took a lot of communication and coordination between fire, ODOT, DTD, the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office, just for infrastructure, road checks, infrastructure checks, power in that area, and people's availability to be able to move back in the area was as big a concern as the fire was initially. So just be aware of that overall.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Chief Coleus, I guess I've been pronouncing your name wrong. I always say Colias. I apologize. But Chief Coleus, I was hoping that you might be able to answer a specific question.
I'll try.
So you talked about your communication level with our city manager, and at a previous workshop that we've had, you spoke to the fact that you called her personally to tell her about us going to a level 3 evacuation. You wouldn't happen to know what time of day that occurred, do you?
No, I have no idea. We communicated via text, via email, and a couple times via calling person to person. The information I gave her was information I got from our incident command, and it sounds like probably information that Nancy Bush called Denise with as well.
Okay. I guess I'm just trying to nail down exactly how many people called our city staff with the information that we were going to level 3 before the city staff shared it onto the Facebook page at 12:51 that day.
I can answer that, Katie.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't get any call from Tony for going into level 3 or from Nancy. And I don't think Melanie received any call either. At that point, I think there was so much confusion in the EOC that we weren't contacted. We only found out through when the map changed, when we went to level 3, because we had a meeting on Wednesday. We weren't even involved at the EOC until Wednesday night, which was after we went into and so we had no information from anyone. We were just told to watch the map. So I think Melanie knows when the map changed. And I think within 5 minutes, we had it up on our website that we were on a level 3 evacuation. And I know we got it on our website, I'm pretty sure, before the calls went out. Is that correct, Melanie?
Yes, I was just looking, I compiled a little timeline here. So at 12:51, that's when I made that Facebook post. That was when, which I've since learned to just share posts. Don't make my own unless it's absolutely necessary. But that was when we were watching the map, and the map changed. So we put the post out there that Estacada was going to a level 3 evacuation, and we shared a link to the map. And that was at 12:51. Then at 12:57, I received the text alert on my phone. I was at City Hall at the time, and I received the text alert saying that Estacada was at level 3. So, I mean, it happened. I know it seemed like a long time that morning when you're waiting and you're wondering, but it happened relatively fast when that map went. We put the post out there, which I don't know that people were completely relying on the city Facebook. I'm sure they weren't at that point for evacuation notices. And then it was right after that, actually 6 minutes after that, that I got the text alert that Estacada was at a level 3. So it happened in a relatively short period of time. But that's the document.
I believe it was the next day they had started the 10 o'clock meetings on the phone, and we discussed on that with Nancy that if they could please give us a heads up when things like that were going to happen. And at that point, then it was normally discussed at those meetings if a map was going to change, and we were told don't put anything up until the map changes, because again, like Nancy said, we didn't want to put anything out there that hadn't happened or might not happen.
And what part of that conversation too, Counselor, is that I think that night too, now it's kind of, I will tell you, September is one long day for me. But if I recall, we also said too, we will let you know if we can. And there were times, I'm also looking at Shane as well as Nick, sometimes we didn't have time to call you because we had to do what we had to do to get level threes. And that also happened in part of Moala as well, just to be honest, because we simply didn't have time. We had to get people out. And I think Nick had something.
Yeah.
I was
if
just
I
gonna,
could just-
oh, sorry, Mayor.
Okay, go ahead, Nick, go ahead.
I was just gonna say the division supervisor started to do request level 3 evacs Tuesday night, specifically off Hillock Burn area, and so that trended on through the middle of the night. So it didn't come as a full-fledged evacuation of Estacada. It started in pockets on Tuesday night, and then by I believe, Nancy, if this is you, because it was early morning Wednesday morning when we pulled the red handle to have Estacada at a level 3.
That is correct.
When
Yeah.
you say the city of Estacada, early level 3,
Early morning.
early morning. So how early are we talking about? Because our assistant city manager just shared that she didn't put it on our Facebook page, which was when the county map updated until 12:51, which was actually afternoon.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how early was that call to evacuate Estacada made?
Yep. So, like I said, so Hillock Burn started Tuesday night, roughly 11 p.m. Okay. And it was in pockets as the fire started, and we started to get the complexity of the fire. So we started to expand those in the early morning of Wednesday. So probably 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning range. And I would have to say that full-fledged Estacada in a level 3 would have been, and this is a guess based with my division supervisor. You got to understand things are morphing here, but as far as factual information, so I could give you a rough estimate between 6 and 9 a.m.
Okay, I appreciate the honesty with that.
That's loose.
Yes, because I also I also have an email of a timeline given to us from city staff saying that our own mayor was in a command center at 10 o'clock and called our city manager at 10:37 with the information that we were going to go to a level 3, and it wasn't until about 2.5 hours after that call was made until the county map had updated. So that's
Right.
one of the reasons why I keep asking about timelines between when a decision is made and when the county map is updated, because really, if you look at just that one timeline alone, there was a decision made at 10:30 that morning, and the county map not updated until 12:51 that afternoon. So that amount of hours could have really made a difference when it comes to people's lives. And when we look back on the events and how many people did lose their lives in other areas throughout Oregon. So,
And Katie, I can appreciate that. Let me interject real quick here, because I've been listening to this and I'm a little perturbed as the mayor, because I was in the meeting with ODF, the Forest Service, CCSO, the state troopers, when the level 3 evac for Estacada was called, a level 3. I was told, as ODF turned to me and said, Mayor, you need to call your people and evacuate immediately. I immediately called my city manager. After that, I told my city manager at 10:37 that we were now in evac 3. Please start notifying. It didn't reach anybody. And then when it finally did, the next person I called was my council president. I said, Katie, we are now going into an evac 3 after I called my city manager. And I said, get that out, because I am not hearing anything. What is happening? She proceeded to put it on Facebook that we are going to an evac 3. Because we did that, half our city was evacuated before we went into full evacuation 3 hours later by the county. Now, this is something that needs to be addressed with my city. That's internal. We'll deal with that. But I just want to make that note made so we all understand where I was at and what really happened that day. Now we can go on with the rest of the questions.
Well, I think this has to be addressed at the county level too, Mayor, because we were told not to post anything until the county verified it for us. And Melanie tried that whole time to get verification from the county. And as Nancy said, once the decision was made, the official decision, those calls went out within 15 minutes. And the call didn't go out till What time, Melanie? 12:57.
12:51.
Yeah.
Yeah.
12:57 when I got the
Yeah.
text alert. So
So I don't know, from that meeting, what took so long. Maybe Nancy can address that because she must have been at that meeting too.
So I can't, I don't have my timeline. I'm kind of in next shoes too. I would have to go look and see what time that call went out from, and I will say though, when we got the information from fire and law in the EOC, we sent it out. We did not hang on to it. We did not sit on it. It went out. So I'm not sure. I would have to go look at those particular timelines to see when our information went out, because I don't have that in front of me.
we
But
can.
Denise,
I'm sorry. I just want to say we could research that a little more thoroughly.
Melanie, I think something's wrong with either your
I-
screen or mine.
Okay,
Oh,
good.
is it her screen?
I think so.
To see. I'm not sure what meeting Mayor Drinkwine was in. Okay,
Oh, there she
sorry.
goes.
Sorry, Melanie, you froze. We didn't hear half what you said.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's better now.
Okay. I think maybe somebody's gaming over here at my house this evening and tying up my bandwidth, darn it. We can do some more research on that, and I can get some information from Nancy. And if there's any other, I don't want to veer us off this if you want to keep discussing it, everybody, but if there's other questions, or I think this is going to take a little bit more digging to find out exactly what happened, because I think there's a discrepancy. I think you're concerned that the mayor told us something and we didn't follow through on it immediately. And so we do need to work that out. But if there's other questions or things like, if there's efforts that the city could have made, if there's other agencies on here want to say, recommendations that we could have been more helpful or whatever. And Jerry's got a hand up.
Jerry's got a question.
Well, I don't really have a question. I just, I think it's very obvious with this exchange that we, since most of us have never seen the emergency protocols for the city, we need to, we as a city, as city council, city staff, we all need to get together and relook at our emergency protocols. We need to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, rather than beating ourselves up over this. We need to relook at all of this and maybe make some adjustments. And but it's apparent that we need to visit this emergency protocol and get it figured out. So that's all I got to say.
Okay. Anybody else want to talk? Katie, back to you.
I still had a couple of questions to go over with some of the groups that are here while we've got them. But I agree with you, Jerry. I think we're going to have to look over our emergency protocols as they are written now and improve them for the future for sure. But I think that part of that is to go back and figure out what went wrong this time so that we know what to fix. That being said, one thing that I want everyone to be aware of is that a couple of weeks ago, it came up during one of our council meetings or a workshop that there was a water shortage or some sort of a water issue that the fire department was experiencing on the first couple of nights as it related to both the Dowdy fire and the Riverside fire. I want to talk about that shortage. First of all, going back to the evac level 3 conversation, I had asked for a detailed timeline from the water plant about their experiences with the shortage in water and the power bumps that they were experiencing through the first couple of nights. Something that was said on that timeline is that our public works department, our water treatment plant, actually went on level 3 evac at 11 o'clock that morning. That would fit more into the timeline of like the mayor calling his evacuation versus when the county called theirs. I would really like to have a definitive time frame as to what time our water plant left on Wednesday the 10th or the 9th or whatever. That would be really helpful information for us to have, because I'd like to know based on which information our own public works department evacuated the city. And then also I was hoping that while Clackamas Fire was here, if they could talk about any of the water shortage difficulties that they experienced here, just so that when we talk about how to fix our response in the future, that we're talking about that potential water shortage that you guys were experiencing. I was listening to the radio, the scanners the first night on the 7th, and especially with the difficulties that you guys were experiencing getting water for the Dowdy fire, and then the second night getting water for all the fires. That sounded like quite an experience. I was hoping that you could talk to us about what we could do as a city better next time, or what we might be able to look to for an investment in our infrastructure to improve if this should happen again. Just wanted to pick your brain about the water shortage in particular.
Sure. Thank you so much, Katie, for asking that question. So, so much of what we depend on are stable water supplies, right? So the first thing that we look for is a fire hydrant. Okay. And if there's a fire hydrant, then that's where we're going to lock into to try to make our fill site, or to hook into a pumper that is fighting the fire. In any one of our wildland urban interface incidents, we send out task forces, and what's automatically dispatched with that is a water tender. The problem we had with this fire is the sheer amount of fires that were going on at the same time, and distances between the fire, where the fires were, and a water supply, and the lack of water tenders that we had. So as far as anytime we get fires like this, we'll radio CCOM and have them notify the water companies to up pressures and volume, and to notify them that what we've got going. Our issue wasn't so much as far as City of Estacada and the amount of water that was going to the hydrants. It was merely a water tender, the amount of water tenders that we had on the road covering multiple different incidents at the same time. Does that make sense? So to answer your question, as far as the City of Estacada, fire hydrants, getting fire hydrants in rural areas is a very tough thing. All right. But the more fire hydrants you have, the more identifiable water sources that you have. Those are huge. The beautiful thing with certain areas is that there's natural water supplies. There's rivers, there's creeks in the event that we need to. But our primary is going to go to a water tender or a tanker, because we know where that water came from. Does that make sense? What we had in this incident is we had situations where we had private citizens with water tenders or water trucks, which was phenomenal. But some of them clogged our pumps because of where they grabbed the water from. And so now all of a sudden I had fire engines that weren't able to pump water because they were impacted with human feces, for an example, right? So having situations like that and making sure that we have a clean water supply, or that the city has a clean water supply, clean water source to be able to draft from or to be able to draw from are crucial to the success of a natural disaster like what was faced.
Were you ever at any point told that our reservoirs were so low that you should not pump out water from the hydrants that you could find in our city?
I was never given that message. Brandon, can you speak to that? Was that?
Yeah, thank you, Katie, for that question. I heard that information anecdotally. Certainly something we could research and find out where that was, where that information was shared, and track down the factfulness of it. But it's sort of an anecdote at this point for me.
I appreciate the honesty on that one. If we could see if there's any validity to it, and if there is any validity to that, I would like to know and maybe have some sort of firsthand account as to, who told them, when that information was received, what they did with that information, and things like that. I would really appreciate to just know, like I said, if there's any validity to it. That is the majority of my questions.
I did send out that. I contacted Greg Ramirez with trying to get that information out. And also the Riverside Fire Incident Management Team. There was, I think it was Tom Behill, was our liaison person. And I contacted him also asking that, Katie, because our water, we needed time to catch up because so much water had been drained from our system. And it took, I don't know how many hours, it's probably on that timeline that you might already have, to
And I-
refill all of our reservoirs. But I tried to get that message out, but it may or may not have been effective. But I did send it out to a couple different places. And I think that then I put it on Facebook that if anybody, you know, sometimes people can control things at their home remotely, that if they had left their sprinklers running, I can control that remotely to please turn them off while we catch up on the water. So
I think that was on the 12th, Melanie, right?
Well,
Well,
I
we'll look
think
at that.
it
It's
was-
on that timeline, but.
yeah,
we can
I
look
think
at-
it was on the 10th that maybe the first time I put it out there. But it continued on. We'd have to double check that, but I'm sure it's timestamped on
Yeah,
Facebook. So
I think it's on our timeline that we gave the council.
I think so.
Yeah.
So there is some truth to that rumor. That message was I was trying to get that message out, but it was, you know, people were working their tails off out there, and it was not always easy to get information to the people driving the trucks and pumping the water. So at least not for me.
Thanks for
All
doing
right.
this, Melanie.
Yeah, did a good job. Katie, you have any more questions, or is that it? That's it?
No, I'm good. I appreciate every single person that is here tonight. Thank you so much for everything you did during the fires and everything you're doing for us here today. Seriously, thank you to all of you.
Thank you. Okay, any more questions from council?
Yeah, so Justin here.
Okay, Justin, go ahead.
So I've actually been asked by a lot of different people, and I don't really know how to answer this question to people, so maybe someone on here can help me. But I've been asked, where did all the resources go that were brought out here after the fact? Do we know where, you know, everything that was donated and given and all that kind of stuff? I've been asked what happened to it, and I don't know what to tell people.
I have some information on that, Justin, that I could send to you, because I know a lot of the clothing was cleaned and boxed according to size. And I know it was being stored at the Assembly of God Church. And I was on a call with a bunch of people working in the area managing that. I think they just tried to do a free like a yard sale to try to get extra donations out. So part of it, I can tell you where part of it went, who is managing what. I don't know if that will answer your entire question or not.
I don't know either, but anything would help to answer that question.
Okay, any more questions, Justin?
No, I think most of them got answered tonight.
All right, great. Paul, anybody? Okay. All right, well, we thank you, Paul.
I was
Oh.
waiting for Paul.
All right.
It looked like Paul had something, so.
No, I was just gonna chime in. I appreciate Katie's questions. It sounds like, well, and I appreciate hearing all that went on behind the scenes. No clue from my experience as to how much coordination went on behind the scenes. So I really appreciate that. Just hearing all the efforts that went into that constantly from it sounds like a couple days before this, as we were getting the alerts of the wind and the humidity issues going on to up until, well, even presently as well too. So thank you for that. It sounds like from the stuff that Katie was asking, the biggest issues were about the communication between the county and the city, especially with the evacuation. I look forward to learning more about that and hearing what comes of that. But mainly just want to say appreciate how much I appreciate all that went on behind the scenes.
Thank you, Paul. Jerry.
Okay, so I pretty much mirror what Paul just said. I guess my question is for maybe Jeannine. So you said that there were Red Cross and other people wanting to come in and start this relief center, but we already had one up and running with the Estacada Community Watch. Being that not a lot of experience in running a relief center with the Community Watch, was there oversight? Were there people that stayed on even though that it was already up and running to help facilitate all that? There's been a lot of questions from the community about you know, were there records kept of the donations, records kept of the money donations, and who donated and where did it go? There's just been a lot of questions. So, and I have no way to answer that. I don't know the answer to it. I've reached out and tried to get answers elsewise, but haven't got it. So that's my question to you. Was there oversight, being that the Community Watch probably didn't have a lot of experience running a relief center? So
I can honestly say there was not oversight. We did not come in and take control over the Estacada Community Watch. It was already a local community grassroots effort. So we just supported them where they could. We did not have, I would probably say it was incorrect. Red Cross was not looking to set up necessarily an operation. They were looking to see where they could support. So we directed Red Cross to provide their service through the Estacada Community Watch, through the Cazadero Relief Center as well. And FEMA wasn't here yet to help set up that early. So I honestly can't answer. There was no oversight from the county for the Estacada Community Watch, because when they got set up, we as a county were unable to be operating and setting up the relief center in a level 3 and level 2 at that point. So from what I understand is the Estacada Community Watch group managed all that oversight themselves. Were tracking the donations that were coming in and going out, and I'm pretty sure from what I've heard there was a lot coming in. So they coordinated with Melanie. This might be kind of the answer you were giving to Justin. Justin, is to a lot of the donations that were coming in were probably more than they could handle. So they were then sending some of those, the clothing and some of the other donations, to other local CBOs to help manage and support those. So Jerry, I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer to that. And the county was not here leading those efforts. We were here supporting them where we could. Nancy, I don't know if you have anything different to add.
Yeah, no, I will just say that anything that did come into the county, which I think it sounds like you're asking about it, what came into that particular center, the county did track everything that we got in, and we can tell you exactly where it all went. But as Jeannine said, yeah, we were not a part of how that got set up and then how it was used.
Okay. Is that all you have, Jerry? Yeah. Okay. Denise,
I just want to say, I think that the Community Watch tracked all of their donations. I know they had a computer system, so I will talk to Joel and get that information for the council, because I'm pretty sure they everything that came in they accounted for. But
Denise,
yeah,
I do just want to second what you just said. They tracked absolutely every donation that was brought into the center. In fact, I know because I donated my personal laptop to their effort for those 2 weeks. And I know that they used my laptop to help track the inventory of all donations that came in. So I can get you copies of that if you'd like any of those copies in the future, Jerry. Okay.
so Katie, will you contact them then, and I'll let you get those reports from them?
Absolutely. I'll ask Joel to go ahead and share it with everyone.
And if you forward it to me, I can send it out to everybody.
Sounds good. They're a nonprofit, so they have to be audited yearly anyway. So sounds good.
Thank you.
okay. Any other questions I'm missing here? Yeah, Nick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wasn't sure if there was going to be any more follow-up for the fireside.
No.
But if not, I just would like to, just while we have this group here, and I spoke to it a little bit earlier, the efforts that CCSO made and the coordination was huge, and the EOC with Nancy Bush, it was instrumental in the evacuations and was huge for this natural disaster that we had. I want to point out a couple of things real quick, because we've heard a lot about where we could have improvements, right? But I want to tell you something about the successes of Clackamas Fire and the people of Clackamas Fire. We were up with our backs against the wall from the minute go of this thing, and what as an operations chief, to see the men and women of Clackamas Fire go 96 straight hours working to try to save lives and save property, and the thousands of homes that were saved by the efforts of the Clackamas firefighters was flat impressive to me as an operations chief. I've never seen the grit and the effort of a group of people in coordination with the brothers in blue that were going and banging doors to evacuate. When we would call, they were coming into the hot zone to evacuate citizens that were in immediate life risk. And so I'm just flat amazed in what we faced, not expecting to have the disaster that we faced, the efforts that were done by the county and by CCSO and by your Clackamas firefighters. I couldn't be prouder of the men and women of Clackamas Fire for all that they did for the citizens of Estacada, for the citizens of Oregon City, for the citizens of Molalla, and for the citizens of Colton. And Director Oliver, he's on, and he can speak to that as well. There was a lot of conversations that me and him have had over the last couple months with stuff, and so we just wanted to share that and appreciate you guys letting us come on to this and share and be part of this. Thank you.
We appreciate you. Kid, did you want to speak to that as well?
Unmuted.
I'm muted. Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Takes me a second. Not much to say other than we've had lots of meetings like Nick said, and I know Clackamas has some things that they can improve on their end, and I know that they're going to do those things. I think that's what can be the best thing to come out of this. We all need to learn from mistakes we make and build on those and be better. But this was a horrific event. We all get that. You guys did the best you could. So that's about all I got.
We thank you, Ken. Appreciate that.
Yeah. So real quick,
just to
cut.
Clackamas
Go ahead.
Sheriff's Office on that.
Yeah.
To support Clackamas Fire, as I said at the beginning, this is a historic thing, so rapidly evolving, and they were just working their tails off 24 hours a day for multiple days with no rest. And it was our honor and privilege to be out there helping them. And like I said, there was no loss of life, which was absolutely amazing for what this event was. And yeah, and it was humbling and to realize that there was no loss of life. So kudos to them.
You're absolutely right. Anybody else wish to comment?
Yeah, I was just going to add too. I didn't hear it mentioned, but
Justin.
from a lot of the stories that I heard as well is, a big shout out to the locals here in Estacada that spent all night and endless hours fighting it as well. I wanted to give them a shout out too. They did a pretty amazing job as well. So I just wanted to throw their names out there as well.
Okay, appreciate that, Justin. Anybody else? No? Okay. You guys all did great tonight. That was a big one. That was a lot of stuff out there to put out there after a fire like this. I mean, you're right. This is something we never would have expected in my lifetime. And we made it through it, and we're on the other side. And the key statement here is there was no loss of life. So this was a magical moment for all of us. I think we can all pat each other on the back and say, hey, we did something. Whether we did it right or not, I don't know, but we did something. So thank you. Moving on, we want to have general discussion and collaborative effort. So we want to look at something that says, hey, what are we going to do in the future to make this better? So I think we're there. You're all at the table right here. I mean, the county, I think county efforts with city efforts, tying us together closer so that we get more accurate, more timely things out there, that we're on the same boat, that we're talking. I think that's pretty important. I don't know. Let's hear from everybody out there. I mean, you see some things here that we could help each other with out there? Jerry, Paul, anybody? Katie? Have you seen anything?
I have a question, Mayor. So
yeah,
it sounds like the agencies are either in the middle of or just beginning their action review. Nancy, do you know when you might have yours completed? Are you looking into next year?
We actually are starting the process right now, and FEMA is helping us do that. So we're going to have 2 questionnaires that are going to go out. One's internal, one is external. That will go out to the cities as well. I'm hoping to have it done in January. We're further behind than I wanted to be at this point because FEMA hasn't been able to get everything out like they wanted to. So I'm hoping in January we'll have one done. And I believe, well, I won't speak for, I think Clackamas Fire is hoping to have theirs done by the end of December. But
Nick,
ours
you're,
will be
Nick,
probably,
you're looking at December.
that's what Clack Fire is. That's the last I heard about Clack Fire.
Okay. So does the council, we want to address this again. Do you want to wait till these come out, or do you want to go ahead before you see that information? What do you want staff to do next?
Well, that's a tough call. Paul, I saw your hand go up slightly.
Yeah, Denise, I think it'd be good to see what the teams come up with, or the divisions come up with. I'd be anxious to see from, that they're going to put the time into that. I think it would be worth taking a few weeks or months to see what they come back with. In the meantime, I think from what Jerry had said, it'd be good for us to go through and Katie, take some time to go through our own action plan as well too,
Okay.
emergency action plan.
Perfect.
Okay. Anybody else?
I was just going to second what Paul said. I think that, everyone else is doing their own after action review. The fact that they're the major players that really affected the city during that major disaster, I think that it makes sense for them to do their own after action reviews first. And once they're all compiled, I think that given enough time for us to review them all in depth, will then give us a greater understanding of how their actions ultimately benefited our city. Because I think that's really the question we're all trying to answer, right? Is what were they doing for the city that, we should have also helped with, or could have done better, or should have taken responsibility for. And I think that really reviewing those after action reviews is going to help us in the future respond to another disaster of any sort, and have greater impact. So I completely agree.
Okay, great. All right. I'm trying to get up to the other screen here. Hold on. All right. So I don't see any more hands. Is there anybody else wishes to speak before I move on? We are at the recommendations for prevention and mitigation and improved response. And I think we just kind of talked about that a little bit. So I think that kind of encompasses that we all get on the same page. We all talk and figure out where we could, make it better. So I just want to say, I appreciate each and every one of you out there. Like I said, this was a once in a lifetime event. I don't think anybody's ever going to see this again, I hope, in our lifetime. We were up against odds that were not favorable, and we made it through in one piece. And I'm able to sit in this meeting and talk to each and every one about what we could do to be better. That to me is impressive. So I thank all of you for making the time tonight to come out and help us with this and be a part of this process. So thank you. Anything else, Denise, you'd like to add?
I just want to thank all the agencies for working with us on this and helping us through this. And, for the agencies also having to deal with COVID, I mean, it wasn't like it was even normal before it happened. So it made it an extra challenge, I guess. But I want to thank everyone for helping the city of Estacada with this.
Yep. Thank you. And I guess that is it for tonight. And we appreciate all of you. So thank you, and go have a good rest of your evening with your families. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey guys, Justin just wanted to apologize. His phone died, and that's what he was on, because he's not, he wasn't able to get on through his iPad. So he apologizes for leaving abruptly.
That's all right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.